never talked back, I've never slept late, I've never sat down when told to stand straight, I've never let go and gone with the flow, I don't even know really why. I've never asked questions or taken a dare, I've never worn clothes that might make people stare, I've never rebelled or stood up and yelled, or even just held my head high. And all of the feelings unspoken, all of the truths unsaid, they're all I have left of the life I never led. I've never gone surfing or ran with a crowd, or danced on a table or laughed much too loud. I've never quite dared to leave myself bared, I've just been too scared I might fall. I've never seen Paris, I've never been kissed, I never quite realized just how much I missed. And what did I get for hedging each bet? Another regret, and that's all. And all of the wishes unasked for, all of the needs unfed, they're all that remain of the life I never led. And now that you've given me one little taste of it, and now that I know what I know, well, how can I go on ignoring the waste of it? After all of the years that I've clung to my fears, won't you help me let go? Help me let go. I want to be brave, I want to be strong, I want to believe I'm where I belong, to stand up and say I'm seizing the day, to not just obey but to choose. And I may not surf, I may not see friends, but I have to know I still have the chance. And maybe I'll make a painful mistake, it's mine though to take or refuse. And all of the doors yet to open, all of the rooms ahead, they're beckoning bright, scary and new, but I'm standing tall and I'm walking through what's gone, maybe gone, but I won't go on playing dead. It's time to start living the life I never led.
Thank you so much, Oscar, Jonathan, and Matt. Thank you so much. Does that come from a show? Which one does it come from? Do you remember? Sister Act, the life that I've never led. What an amazing thought, right? I'm going to start living the life that I've never led, the one that I've been afraid to lead, the one that I've been afraid to go for, the one that I've been afraid to just really open the gates, the floodgates, and be all of that. And what an amazing thing to make a decision to lead that life, right? And that's so much of what we do here at CSLDallas. It's what we do in practicing the science of mind and living a spirit-led, mystical, metaphysical, powerful life. And to become that life, we have to become who we are. I'll wait, it's okay. Right? We have to become who we already are. It's not like we have to be more spiritual. We don't have to become a spiritual being. We already are that, and yet we have to become that in our lives. And so, as both Karen and Joe have talked about, we are tipping the scales to that life, to becoming that. We have to use our spiritual tools, work the principles and practices every day to the best of our ability. This is what tips the scales. This means thinking beyond psychology, of being a human, into the metaphysics of cosmic consciousness and ultimate reality. And it's easier to be afraid. It is. It's humanly easier to be afraid. Our reptilian brain is designed to keep us safe and secure. It is easy for that part of our humanness to take hold and to convince us that it's right and that we need to do certain things to keep ourselves safe and secure and to fit in or to be angry or to push out all of the ways in which we protect ourselves. And yet, to live the life that we have not yet fully led, that spiritual life, requires an entirely different place to stand. To tip the scales, we have to actually stand someplace different. And that can be really challenging, especially here we are at the beginning of 2020. We're at the beginning of a new decade, not just a new year. We're beginning of a whole new decade. And we hear tremendous conversations about the environmental issues that we are facing. Now we have the potential of escalation in the Middle East and the United States. We've done our beautiful prayer. We have lots of things, and we have our own lives. Whether it's a person in our life or a situation in our life or things that may or may not be going on, how easy it is for us to clutch, to close down, to close off, to push away, or to blame and make wrong. And none of those things, I think, are the life that we want to lead. Right? We want to lead our lives from that deeply grounded, centered, and spiritual place. And so we're going to be talking about this month. We're going to be talking about that actually this whole year, lots of different ways. We're going to engage in this idea of tipping the scales. How do we consciously, deliberately, and through our intentions, choices, and actions participate in tipping the scales in our own lives, in the life of those around us, and on the planet as a whole. We had a beautiful conversation about this morning in our Science of Mind class. Right? What are we here for? We are here to evolve consciousness, and we are here to evolve the human race. And we do that by tipping the scales from our human fear into our spiritual truth, from our human need for security into our spiritual understanding of what is actually going on and the nature of reality and how we participate in it. How we are a vital and vibrant part of it, how all of creation is a part of it. And so we go to those deep roots of what we know to be true and find that place to stand so that we can tip the scales. We're using a really powerful book. It may be small, do not be fooled. This is, both Karen and I really, really love this book. It's called How to Use the Science of Mind. And it is about living it on a daily basis in consciousness. And really an extraordinary gift. I actually just wanted to stand up here and read you the first chapter because it's that good. But I didn't really think that would fly in ministerial school. I was taught I had to tell stories and be funny, so... So I didn't think standing up here and reading it to you was going to be such a good idea. But there are a few things, a few passages from the first chapter that I want us to walk through because it gives us the place to stand so that we can be a stand for peace and love and wholeness and abundance and all of the things that we want for ourselves and, of course, that we want for everyone else. So we begin with this beautiful quote. Spirit is the creative cause back of and within everything. God is not a spirit, but the Spirit. This one Spirit is the Spirit of all people. One mind. I can't read my own notes here, it's too dark. One mind, innumerable individualized points in the creative consciousness of an absolute, which always remains one undivided and indivisible unity. What the hell does that mean? Right? Like, really? Okay, that's a lot of big words. One mind, innumerable individualized points in the creative consciousness of an absolute which always remains one, undivided and indivisible unity. Can you imagine that? This one undivided individual unity as the creative cause back of everything? For a long time when I first got into Science of Mind, those were lovely words. I liked saying them. They made me feel good, like I was a part of something. But truly, honest to God, I had no idea what they meant. Really. It was a nice intellectual exercise, and that's great. And it is the place that we start. But how we begin to tip the scales in our own lives is we begin to build consciousness. And to build consciousness, we actually have to explore these spiritual realities. And I mean seriously explore them. We have to contemplate. What does the absolute mean? What does that mean? What does a one undivided and indivisible unity mean? Not just intellectually. What does it feel like? What does it look like? What does it seem like? How do we get a hold of this infinite absolute idea? So for me, some of you have heard me say this. I have contemplated each of these ideas for well over a year. Like literally, I spent a year in every meditation contemplating infinity, contemplating the absolute. Like, what does that mean, absolute? Why is that? Why does every classic metaphysical author use that term to speak of spiritual reality? There must be something important about that, right? It means not conditioned upon anything. Wow. Like, what do you know of that's not conditioned upon anything? Well, the sun, the sunlight. Whether there are clouds or not, whether the earth is facing it or not, no matter what my experience of my life is, right, the sun is there and it's shining. Do you see? It's not conditioned to my experience, my perception, my thought about it, my projection onto it, whether I like it or not, nothing. Nothing about me impacts the fact that the sun is shining light and that light will eventually reach the earth. Do you see? So I play those kind of games with myself. Like how can I imagine what something unconditioned actually means? An unconditioned reality, an absolute reality. So another metaphor that I like to use that maybe will help you is the metaphor of wind. You can't actually see the wind, right? This is not a picture of the wind. What is this a picture of? The effect of the wind. This is not a picture of the wind. This is a picture of the effect of the wind. What is the wind? The cause. The wind, which we cannot see, is the cause of these dandelion seeds blowing. We can see the effect. And because we can see the effect, we can extrapolate from that something blue, right? Could have been a man, person-made blow, but there's something that has caused this to happen. And what caused it was not conditioned on whether or not that dandelion was there, or whether there were 5 dandelions there, or whether we like the dandelions, or whether we think the dandelions are doing a good job, or whether the dandelions really should have been yellow flowers and not yet seedlings because we weren't ready. Or any of that stuff, do you see? Unconditioned reality is the wind. Absolute unconditioned reality is the wind. And this, and our lives, is the effect of that cause, of that creative cause. And so these are the forces that move in the world. And part of our job is to examine the forces. Like, what is the force of love? You can't see it, can't measure it, you can't take it into a test tube into the laboratory, but we can see the effect of love or its absence. We can see the effect of that. And so these are the causal movements in consciousness that we want to really begin to try to understand and cultivate an experience of in our own realities. Cultivate not just an intellectual idea, but a deep relationship with this unseen causal reality. So we tip the scales by understanding and using the idea that there is such a thing as wind, right? We can put a wind turbine in front of it, create energy. We can put airplane wings in front of it or in it, and the plane lifts off, right? Do you see? We use it to create effects. We call that in our teaching, we call that making a demonstration. I use a law to make a demonstration, right? Which is great. We teach that a lot. We spend a lot of time on that. But ultimately, we want to move beyond having to demonstrate this, that, and the other thing. I want to demonstrate a good house and a nice job, and I want to demonstrate, happiness and this and that. And what we actually want to do is create a consciousness in which we are functioning in the world from these spiritual truths. And when we do that, then life unfolds in a more organic manner, and we get to actually be about creation and co-creating. I had a wonderful conversation at the Burning Bowl with a woman who's been a part of our community for years and years and years and years, and she's recently moved a little bit too far away, so we really only see her on major holidays. We had a lovely catch-up conversation, and she's been, 10 years now in the science of mind, practicing this, and she said to me, "Oh my God, it's so great. I'm no longer manifesting anything in specific. I'm just demonstrating creativity in my life. So I'm about creating an amazing life." And I said, that's where we're going. That's what we want to be about in our lives. Sure, yes, we can demonstrate health when we need it and wealth when we want it and things like that. But ultimately, it's about tipping the scale so that we stop looking at life from our human standpoint about what we want. And we tip the scales to standing in our spiritual standpoint about knowing what we already have and who we already are. Do you see? It completely changes everything. Standing in that place changes everything. We do have to do these things one at a time. And it takes time. It takes time to develop consciousness. And we do it by developing our spiritual practice based on the truths of the spiritual reality that we know. And we use our practices like meditation and spiritual mind treatment and all the things that we teach in classes that invite us to, or let me rephrase that teach us how to keep tipping the scales in our consciousness from human to spiritual, from human to absolute, from conditioned to absolute, right? We're constantly using all of these practices over and over and over to tip the scales each time individually until they stay basically tipped, right? And when they've stayed basically tipped, that means we've developed consciousness. We no longer have to do the individual things. Now, that doesn't mean they can't tip back occasionally, right? And then we have to do our work and bring our scales back over again. And what tips them? What tips us out of consciousness? Yeah, well, you know as well as I do, right? Some issue at home, some issue at work, and some issue in the world. Right? We read the news, we get out on Facebook, we see what's going on, and we can have the very real visceral experience of clutch, of fear, And we don't want to not experience our feelings, but we want to recognize that our feelings come from the human side of us, the human experience, not from the spiritual reality. And to have the human feeling is necessary, and it's part of what makes us alive and makes life the gamut of the life experience, right? We're not trying to flatline. We're not trying to, oh, I'm always going to be perfect. Everything's going to be fine. Okay, now I'm bored. Okay, this is really boring, right? We actually want to have experiences. And the lows don't have to be something that we avoid. We want to have our feelings, but we want to recognize our spiritual truth. And what's the fundamental spiritual truth? In the next thing that Ernest Holmes says in How to Use the Science of Mind, we have a spirit in the sense that the spirit is individualized through each of us. But this spirit is not separate from spirit. A person is an individual, while life is universal. The universal individualizes itself in the individual. You could meditate on that for a year. Really. And you know what? And if you were to contemplate that for a year, just that, everything would change. You would tip the scales. We would all tip the scales to stand in the spiritual truth of who we are. The universal individualizes itself in each one of us, in all beings everywhere, in every place where individual consciousness is revealing itself. On this planet, on planets, wherever other planets are, where self-awareness has become self-aware. Now, the first time that I really began working with this idea and really began trying to tip the scales in my own life into a different way of experiencing was when I was in practitioner training with a really beloved minister, Reverend Ernie Forks. And he was one heck of a teacher. And we were not allowed to use the words child of God. We were not allowed to say we were a part of the divine, and we were not allowed to say we were a piece of spirit. The only thing we were allowed to say is that we were an aspect of the whole. The hell does that mean? Aspect of the whole. Okay, well, I actually had to go re-look up the word aspect again, right? And aspect... So before we answer that question, what in the world does that mean, right? This is the kind of deep thinking that the science of mind invites us into. We want to actually explore what metaphors and what words we use to describe the nature of reality, because it informs where we stand. Bert and I are going to teach the philosophy of the science of mind starting this Thursday. If you want to engage in that conversation, please be in the class. It's really an opportunity for us to do this kind of exploring and find those metaphors and ways of engaging with the ideas so they become real. So an aspect is like a facet. So I remember back in practitioner training, when I was in practitioner training, I began to imagine the universal absolute reality as a diamond, and that each one of us were facets on a diamond. You can't remove a facet, can you? You can't shave it off, but you can point to it. There, that's an individual facet on the diamond. And if you shine the light through it, every facet shines the light a little bit differently. Okay, that started to make it real to me that we are the universal individualizing itself in the individual. Something that cannot be taken away, but is actually somehow unique. And the light in this metaphor, shining through it, shines a little bit differently through each facet. So in re-looking up what the word aspect means, facet is one of the synonyms, an irreducible part, and it is a part that is viewed or gives perspective, which I found fascinating. And the example in the dictionary was Old Faithful is an aspect of Yellowstone Park. You have to think about that for a minute, right? If Old Faithful is an aspect of Yellowstone Park, what does that mean about you being an aspect of the divine? Well, you can't take the Old Faithful out of the Yellowstone Park. It wouldn't be Old Faithful in the Yellowstone Park, right? It'd be a geyser someplace else. Yellowstone Park would be different if Old Faithful wasn't there. It's intimately connected to that part of the diverse ecology. I mean, we can spin this metaphor out as long as you want to play with it. But do you see, these are the kinds of things that begin to shape how we use the science of mind in our own lives to tip the scales. We begin to explore these things and see what does it mean to be an aspect of the whole, not a creation of God. Right? Changes the game entirely. How does this show up practically for us to tip the scales? Well, for me, one of the things is, if this is really true, I had to stop assuming that I was the great exception. That the universe and that the divine love was actually emanating through everybody but me, because I knew how flawed and just broken I was when I first got into the science of mind. And so one of the things that I learned, there's two aspects to one of the things that I learned, and that is to stop shooting on myself. I'll wait. To stop shooting on myself, right? And because should is simply blame and shame masquerading. It's masquerading as I know what should have been done by you or by me. It's just blame or shame masquerade in a mask. And so I kid you not, it took me a year to expunge the word should from my vocabulary. I would highly recommend that you spend a year doing that. Literally. And every time you hear it coming out of your mouth, rephrase the statement and take that word out. See what happens. If you have to try to say that without the word should in it, without blame or shame. What also happened for me, what I think would happen for you, if you have not done this yet in your own life, is that you will discover all the ways in which you find fault or seek to blame. And what happens when we're finding fault and seeking to blame? We are not in our spiritual self. We're not becoming who we are. And we're not seeing the aspect of the divine that is showing up in front of us. And so we're not engaging from the tipped side of the scale where we want to be. And so instead of finding fault or blame, not who did this or how did this happen, our task is to ask, what now? And what does what now open up? Co-creation. What do I want? Right, this is what is. Okay, that it broke, or that didn't work out, or that was a failure, or that was a mistake, or whatever it was, right? That is what is in the moment. But the minute we ask what now, we're opening up that space of co-creation. We're no longer in our human stuckness, our human victim, our human whatever. We're now engaged on the other side of the scale in that place of co-creation. To stop shooting on ourselves is one of the and others is one of the single biggest, simplest spiritual practices that you can have if you are still in that place. So as we open that place of co-creation up, Ernest Holmes says this: it is the original creative cause doing something new through each one of us. Here is the entire quote. A person is an individualized center of divine thought. And through us, the individual thinker is finding a fresh starting point for the creative power. Therefore, without violating universal or natural laws, the mind of each person steps in to specialize or make personal use of these laws. We then are given power over our own life. We cannot alter the laws of nature, but we can so alter our relationship to them that that which had bound us may now free us. We have been given the prerogative of spontaneous thinking. We have been given the ability to initiate a new chain of causation. We announce our own activity. This activity is the activity of the mind, divine mind operating through us. It is the original creative cause doing something new through each one of us. Every day, every moment of every day, this is available to us. The opportunity to be the original creative cause, doing something new through each one of us. To do something new in our own lives, to surf, to speak up, to do all those things that were part of the life I didn't want to lead or was afraid to lead. Right? To do something new, make a new move, have a new idea, say it a new way, engage in it in a new way. And the good news is that this is not only true for us individually, but as we do it individually, we are tipping the scales collectively. I'm quite showing my age. I don't know how many of you remember having nuclear war drills in school. What did they have us do? Climb under the desk. Well, that was really going to help. Good enough, I didn't know any better. I didn't know that it wasn't going to help. I remember laying in bed. So this was in Philadelphia. I remember laying in bed at night and hearing planes flying over my house and thinking, is this the one with the bomb? Is this the one? Is it going to happen tonight? We were having nuclear war drills in school. I was terrified. Everybody around me was terrified. That's all they talked about. Everything was terrifying around it and about it. As many of you know, my parents come from Germany. They grew up through the war in Germany as subtle Nazi resistors. My dad did fight in the army. He was conscripted into the German army. They came to the United States, and when they came to the United States, the Berlin Wall was up, and we were solidly in the Cold War. My mother had people on the other side of that wall, family members on the other side of that wall that she never expected to see, hear, or know anything about. My mother was married to an Episcopalian priest, very active at that point in the Episcopalian Church. And she got involved in something called the Friendship Force, a Christian organization of Christian women who decided that they would get to know their Russian neighbors. So they went to Russia, and they stayed in people's homes. Women, ordinary women, any one of you, any one of us, it could have been that person, went, they hung out for 2 or 3 weeks in a Russian home. And then the next year, Russian ladies were invited to come hang out in American homes. The same. And for 3 or 4 years, that happened. That was going on. That was no diplomacy, no fear, no threats, nothing. Just, hey, let's get to know each other. Let's. My mother came home from those trips transformed over and over and over again because, she had a lot of fear around all of that. And she had seen what war could do. She lost her brother in the war. She had seen it firsthand. It was an unexploded bomb right outside back door. I think the friendship force went over to Russia all the way up to 1988. What happened in 1989? The wall came down. My mother said, "Oh my God, I didn't know that that was possible in my lifetime. I never expected to see that." Even though she didn't expect to see it, she kept going on those trips. Do you see? Her action was in alignment with her spiritual truth. That if we behave in a loving manner, in alignment with what we know to be true, if we do a new move, do something new, a new result has to show up. Now, I don't believe those women in the Friendship Force were the only people who were contributing to that. In 1986, we did the World Peace Meditation at 4 a.m. in the morning in the Kingdom in Seattle. We had 8,000 people howling at the moon. We did prayers and meditation and music and things like that. And we were picketed by the Christians for praying for world peace for an hour. Was kind of weird. Did give us front page news, though. They didn't want to cover the peace meditation, but they would cover the fact that we were picketed. Yeah, pretty interesting, right? Tells us something about what we should be paying attention to and how in the news. Because what we know is what bleeds leads. All the bad news is what captures our attention. But there is so much good news going on in the world. There are so many people doing so many good things. So many new things are happening all over the world, all over the United States. And we don't hear enough about it. And so we allow that fear to grow, rather than simply showing up like my mother did, year after year after year, not knowing how the end result was going to come about. Peace, a healing of our environment, a healing of poverty and homelessness, whatever those things are. Right? We don't need to know how it's going to come about. What we need to do is to continue to create newness and recognize that that is the original creative cause doing something new through each one of us. This is an image of the eternal dance of creation by Pooja Grover. Something new. I didn't imagine the creative process looking like that. Right? We each have a new way. We imagine it, we perceive it, we practice it, right? And this book, as it teaches us our spiritual mind treatment, this is what the whole point of a spiritual mind treatment is, to build the understanding that when we say this new thing is reality, we're simply describing spiritual reality. It just hasn't come into form yet. And in that description, do you see, we bring it into reality. We are using the law to create something completely new that hasn't been created before. Ernest Holmes says, instead of denying that universal spirit is personal, we should emphasize such personalness. It is one of the chief cornerstones of this spiritual philosophy. Each individual life is a unique expression of the universal wholeness. No two lives can or ought to be alike. The one universal life glows through everything. We give individual expression to it. So when we tip the scales, you see, we stop thinking of ourselves as broken, flawed, incapable, small, fearful, or whatever those things are. We tip the scales to recognize that we are radiant, magnificent beings of love and light. We are an aspect, a facet on the diamond of the universal. And the light is shining through us all the time. That is who we are. And every spiritual practice that we do and all of the spiritual work that we do is to uncover, is to pull back the veil. The veil in our own lives and the veil through which we see life out there. We want to pull back the veil of fear and pull back the veil of, well, it's always been this way, and pull back the veil of victim and blame and ain't it awful. And stand in that place collectively together that each one of us is this radiant light. And when we are this radiant light, we show up this way and we perceive it, we see it. And when we see it in our minds, what does the universal law say? Yes, then that is what must manifest. Life can do for us only what it does through us. Ernest Holmes says, we are like an artist who sets up his canvas on a shore, wishing to paint a marine scene. Because the artist is an individual, he or she will interpret the scene in the light of their own consciousness. They might think, oh, I want seagulls in the picture. I want a boat in the distance. I want children playing on the shore. And through it all, I want a great sense of peace, calm, and beauty. Do you see? Our lives are the great canvas. And our art is the co-creation of our life. And we actually get to choose. We get to decide what kind of life we're going to paint. Are we going to paint it out of our fear, or are we going to paint it out of our spiritual truth? Karen's going to talk about her class, The Power of Decision. And it's an extraordinary opportunity to really look at, are we choosing to stand in the tipped scale place? Are we choosing that? And let me promise you, my friends, that you are not choosing just for yourself, right? When you choose not to become fearful, when you choose to stand for peace, when you choose to look for the good news, that is co-creating on the collective level the same way that we are co-creating on the individual level. What life are you creating, designing, choosing? What aspect of love or joy, wholeness, harmony, abundance are you choosing to paint on the canvas of your life? It is in the painting of your life that you become who you are.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and for you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright, blessed day, the dark, sacred night, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of the people passing passing by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies cry. I'll watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I will ever know. And I think to myself, what